It's time to look at the weekend newspapers here on The Fix, and to help me make sense of the headlines, I'm joined by journalist Jan Joubert and former Cape Times and Cape Argus editor Gasant Abarder. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me here in Ekapa, where we're coming from The Fix for this week. Jan, the story on the Sunday Times headlines, ANC in land U-turn shock. Is it really such a big shock?
Well, it depends who you believe. At this stage, it seems as though the ANC is sort of nowhere in that process, where the big question is whether they will keep the court as arbiter or not. And it seems as though there are many U-turns being made. Initially, it seemed as though the NEC decision was to not give the courts any power to be arbiters, but now Dr. Matoli Motshekga, who is the chair of the committee, comes closer to what the ANC has said from the beginning, which is that there will be the power of arbiter to the court, which means that if you were to be in any way expropriated and you think that it's not fair and just compensation, then you can still go to the court to, for a decision on whether it was fair and just.
Gasant, is that your reading of the situation? Because for me, the court has always been the arbiter, even before the amendments were made. In fact, Justice Langa was the one who said he's waiting for a test case. So is this a badly written story, or is this the ANC really changing its mind?
You know, that's a very good question, Karima, because I found it a little bit ambiguous as well. But yes, I think a move like that, if indeed they want to exclude the courts of being the final arbiter, it won't pass constitutional muster.
It will be illegal,
yes.
Exactly.
And I think, in a weird way, you know, we've seen the January 8th statement. The ANC is a bit like an old ship that takes 3 hours to make a 10-meter turn. And I think what South Africans want, and they're becoming increasingly frustrated, especially about the land issue, they want some leadership. They want to see something happen. We've heard about the new dawn, but we're not seeing any
Now, one of the
movement.
big things of this story around land are two things. There was a report that found that the problem wasn't actually legislation. The problem was implementation and corruption in that process. Now, if the Department of Land Reform is actually going to be the arbiter and not the courts, aren't we just setting ourselves up for more of the same, Jan?
Absolutely. That's the point, Karima. The report you're referring to is the high-level report of former President Motlanthe, which made it very, very clear, but also the report by the Presidential Commission on Land Reform made it very clear that the problem comes with the implementation. So what we are seeing here is, I think, the ANC speaking with forked tongue, where on the one hand they want to go, and this is the Radical Transformation grouping, which is the Zuma Magashule grouping, want to try and not lose votes to the EFF on this topic, and on the other hand, of course, the Ramaphosa grouping, which knows that this will be anathema to any sort of investment in the country if you take away any power that there is to actually have any property. So,
now, Gasant, this tightrope, right, between what people call a populist call and what others are calling an investment, call, for me is a false dichotomy, because you can't invest in a country where the majority of people don't actually have a stake in owning their own country. I mean, long-term investors should actually welcome any efforts that most of South Africans actually own land. Sure. But this is not what is necessarily being proposed. That is putting the right of who to own land in the hands of the state. And we saw the state, in many instances, can't even roll up an order if it wanted to.
You need an application in triplicate for that. But just to come back to the story, it actually says that the EFF won't support this motion or what this proposal, which is very interesting, because I think the EFF in chief has been most vocal about giving people land, yes, you know, and in quite radical ways. And which is why I'm saying this is a bit of a...
So this is actually just...
It's a bit of a ruse, you know?
Further. Okay, let's move to the city press. Unfortunately, another deputy minister caught up here in using supposedly, or apparently using private, business on the taxpayer's dime. Jan, last week we had Stella Ndabeni Abrams being accused of taking her husband with to Davos and him going on a spending spree. She's disowned that story. That was a story was carried in the Sunday Independent. Here we have another deputy minister accused of again using our tax money for personal use. Do you think this undermines Ramaphosa's commitment to clean governance?
Oh, by all means, it goes straight against it. I mean, what we are referring to here is Deputy Minister of Social Development Henrietta Bogopane Zulu on tape claiming to take a man who wants to marry some family member of hers on trips so that he can use his S&T money to put it away for Lobola. And she doesn't even in the story refute it at all. She says it's me trying to help somebody. And who is paying for this help? The South African taxpayer. That is corruption, clear and simple.
Should she be fired, Gasant?
Absolutely. You know, we've learned nothing. We know about Travelgate in the early, 1990s. There were very kind of scant consequences for that. But I think we need to get tough. If we're talking about getting rid of, and we've got all these inquiries about state capture, we want to see some prosecutions now.
Yeah.
We've got a DPP who says that she's not afraid to act. The problem with these positions is that we've got figureheads. We're more interested in what the public protector's wearing at the red carpet at the opening of Parliament. It's time that we start holding these officers accountable. You know, nobody's above the law, and the public needs to see that.
Absolutely. Now, of course, I had the CEO, Mr. De Ruyter, on my earlier segment. The quality of that interview very poor. But let's pick up on some of the salient points that I would like to explore with you guys. He is, for example, saying that the planned breakup of Eskom into 3 needs to be done in such a way that it doesn't damage the system more, and that it should be done in quite a consistent manner with regards to implications for capital gains tax, for jobs, etc. Is that a man who actually understands all the political minefields, Jan, that he has to walk as he tries to get this very expensive, very broken power utility back on its feet?
Does anyone know their way through those minefields? No. I mean, there are a lot of people who have been injured in those minefields already. The question is, and this is the point which our government must grasp and which I do not see in, for instance, how the ANC NEC decided on the South African Airways situation. In the end, an airline must be profitable and flying. In the end, an electricity generator must generate electricity. It is not some sort of bank of job opportunities. Work must be done. And I think it would be good if the politicians would leave Mr. De Ruyter to do his job as he sees fit in a practical way and forget the political minefields, because quite frankly they're going to blow up all of us if they go on in this way.
Gasant, I see you nodding your head.
They might not have the power to blow us all up. But what I'm saying is that I agree completely with Jan. I mean, this isn't something we need to play with now. Power, water is not, they're not playthings, you know.
Yes.
The politicians need to get out, leave the professionals to do their jobs. We can't have a situation where businesses without power, where universities and schools, there's no electricity. So if this is what he's proposing and he's been chosen to lead, let him lead. I don't know what this fascination is, particularly with SAA, about it being a public entity. Privatize the thing, make it profitable. Nowhere in the world do we have airlines that are run by governments. It smacks of like old archaic thinking, you know.
If one is to accept that you're both saying privatize everything, we've seen that private companies are not necessarily the poster girls and poster boys for efficiency. We've seen private companies with their big hands in our cookie jar, in our fiscus. For example, your Bains, your KPMGs. The Zondo Commission has just asked for an extension. They're likely to be granted, Gasant. Does the answer always lie in privatization, Or is it a question of having law enforcement agencies that can actually deal with corruption, whether it is conducted by private or public individuals?
I think the tone is to be set by the government. I mean, when ministers do the things they do, like this whole Lebolo scandal, the private sector feels they can get away with murder, you know?
That's where we will actually have to leave it, unfortunately. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming in. You've had your fix for the week. We hope that you take care and, of course, join us again next week, Sunday.